So my experience with biosimilars has really changed over the last couple of months here, where as more entrants have come into the marketplace and as more physicians are either choosing to use them or from exterior plan design are being, I'll say forced. Yes, exactly. Somewhat forced to use them. I think the experience level is definitely rising here, relatively rapidly. And I think what we've experienced in our health system is that as people have changed, we really aren't seeing any issues with it. So we've tried to roll out in different disease states differently based on physician preference, where in some cases we've only used it for new patients, or we've had providers request that we only use it for a new patient. Others, though, we have had some successful switches. I think we've also seen it depends a little bit on what the product is being used for, right? So I think if you look at some of the filgrastim products, for example, there's, it's an acute need. You've got a relatively reasonable endpoint that you can measure. The providers were very, very comfortable with that. As you move into some of the other products where it's a little bit less cut and dry or black and white what the outcome is, a little more hesitation. But as we've pointed to some of the data, both in the United States, but also some of the European data, I think we're really starting to see the physicians become more and more comfortable using the products.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. We had a couple of early adopters in terms of rheumatologists or gastroenterologists, but the pace was much slower than what we anticipated. But we're seeing the European data coming out now where they have 60–80% of the market share, and particularly the Scandinavian countries. And we have physicians, and we actually now are getting members asking, well, how come not here? I mean, we've built this and nobody's coming scenario. And it does result in lower cost. The buy and bill methodology that most of the drugs are delivered on doesn't lend itself much to, say, a pharmacist's involvement. Certainly, it's outside of that. And I think that would, when the FDA approves interchangeability for the pharmacist, that will really speed the process. Because right now it's totally separate and it's under the purview of the provider.
Well, I think, and you hit on something that we were surprised by as well, that that we didn't see the uptake. I think a lot of us thought that as soon as they hit the market, we were going to see 20, 30, 50% market share swings to the biosimilars, and just really didn't see that. But what we are seeing is, with, in particular, as you mentioned, some of these are billed more on the PBM or on the pharmacy side. And we are seeing pretty dramatic moves by, at least from certain payers, where we're moving essentially all of those patients to a biosimilar. And in our experience, what we've seen and what our pharmacists have been trying to do is, as much as possible, write in kind of collaborative practice agreements or writing in agreements with physicians where some of those changes can be made on the fly. Might be a little bit, too much or I might be selling it too much to say that it's that easy, but trying to put the things in place, whether it be, again, with order sets or with, I'll call it automatic substitutions, but more so working with providers to even have them write for, instead of a trade name, having them write for, and again, with biologics, you always have to be careful calling it the generic name, but essentially the generic name, such that we can use the one that will be the most beneficial from a cost perspective for the patient.
And we've seen the quickest uptake is in those, I would call them oncology support products. Right. The filgrastins, the white blood cell reports, supports. I assume when we start seeing erythropoietins come out, we'll see the same thing, because it's not the oncology drug, it's ancillary. Oftentimes those are left to the discretion of the pharmacist to fill those orders. We have talked to the oncology pharmacists in a lot of our big healthcare systems, and they determined that. So there was that fairly quick uptake right there. And now we're just trying to capitalize on that.
And I think, and you mentioned kind of the difference between the buy and bill and the pharmacy side. I think, for us, we've actually almost seen it easier to make the change on that clinic side, because, there have been things such as IVIG, for example, where inside of the health system, we were probably using one manufacturer, unless there was a real reason to use one of the other. And most of the time the order was just being written IVIG, pharmacy to select product or pharmacy to dose, those types of things. We're starting to see that with some of the products that have one or even two biosimilar options now as well.
Yeah, and we've done the same thing in our P&T committees where we've talked about therapeutic equivalence. We see no difference in the outcome. IVIG is a very good example of that. We have a dozen products. Let's pick the most cost-efficient one for us. We're seeing that with knee hyalurons, a little different aspect of it, but it is going to slide into biosimilars as well because there is no difference in outcomes.